Well, time for the last insider segment of this political season, and it may mark the moment we realize campaigns are changing significantly because of Donald Trump and Justin Trudeau. Let's find out why with Jamie, Kathleen, and David, all here in studio tonight. So I want to get a sense of how you think political campaigning has changed since we started this panel. But I'm going to use a guide, and the guide is you in the first case. This is what you said in 2011 about campaigning. Let's see if it's still true now. Watch this.
I actually worry about something different in the first couple of hours of the campaign, and that is framing it for the media, framing it for the storytellers who are going to be telling the story, our story, the partisan story, for the rest of the campaign. Because unless you convince those people that you know what you're doing, that you're on top of your game, and that you've got a chance to win, you'll never even get out of the starting gate. You won't even get your message to the public.
I don't think anybody doubts that was the case back then, but I wonder now whether social media has changed all that.
Yeah,
the media itself is as important as it used to be.
Yeah, it might have been
like
right
you.
then, but I'm sure not right now. We've seen that completely upended. Obviously, the example everybody uses is Trump, but Trudeau as well. And one of the things that happens now, when you wanted to put your message on television and you had to go through a journalist who would fact check what you had to say, or when you wanted to put an ad on television, you had to get a Telecaster number. You had to prove to the television people that what you had to say was correct and true. Now you don't have to be right anymore. This whole world of fake news that exploded in America, I predict, is coming to Canada. And so as long as you're out of the gate with something, you don't have to convince those people anymore. You just have to speak in an echo chamber to the people that already believe what you have to say.
Do you agree with that, Kathleen?
Well, I do think that Trump showed us how we could get around a paid media strategy. We talked about that on the show before, and how you could even get around an earned media strategy, you know, by him using the social channels as effectively as he did. But that said, I think since we started the panel, you know, 7 or 8 years ago, I think the pendulum has swung so dramatically to the science of data, right? Collecting data, the kind of new ways to target and ID voters. We can figure out what triggers them, what motivates them to vote. We do behavioral modeling now, how we mine social feeds like Facebook to figure out who these people are. That's what Trump did in the campaign. And I actually think that in some ways we do need to go back to the basics. And I think that a strong message, and the number one job of any campaign, is really to persuade and engage. And if you get away from that, you know, your campaign ultimately, I still think, will fail.
David?
I actually would really agree with that. I mean, it's clear that mass media is not what it was, but nothing else is what mass media was either. And I still think that the framing out of the gate of a campaign by the media is very, very important. And certainly they could do you tremendous damage if they consider that you've made a mistake or you've come out of the gate very weakly. But I think that to the point that, that Kathleen was making is that we went through a cycle of really data-driven, micro-targeting campaigns, the kind of thing Susan Delacour talked about in Shopping for Votes, about how you identify tiny micro-segments of the population and what's the thing that's going to appeal to them. That's where the conservative, for instance, boutique tax cuts came from. And I think what we saw in the last campaign, and what I think is still true, is that a big inclusive narrative trumps that kind of micro-targeting campaigning, and nothing communicates a big inclusive narrative still better than television. So I think television's demise at the moment is greatly overstated. Who knows what's to come?
But I think that's the key point. Who knows what's to come? The past is in prologue. What we're going to see going forward is like nothing we've seen in the past. We now have people talking to each other in very narrow segments, much more difficult to move them off the position they're on. And I think everybody's got to be holding back and really looking to say, you know, just where are we going?
Now it's David's turn. We'll pull back from that same campaign, 2011. Your thoughts at that time? No, your thoughts at that time. They may not have changed. No, your hairdo's considerably different, but then so is mine, right? But watch this on polling, David. Watch this.
In fact, if people now tell you our polls, our internal polls are different than the public, they're almost certainly lying about that because there's so many public polls and they're all going to be roughly right. So it's not like they're all missing it and there's a big difference going on in the campaign.
Okay, so the polling business has taken a bit of a beating since then, but is it still as important as it was then in the campaigning structure?
Absolutely. I don't think there's a serious campaign that doesn't test at least all of its ideas through polling and really have polling as a foundation of its strategy. The issue with polling is very, very simple in election campaigns, is that the polls are still very, very accurate at telling you what 100% of the population thinks. But somewhere between 50 and 60% of the population votes. And polling has had a very difficult time, pollsters have had a very difficult time modeling who that 50 to 60% is. And to get that wrong, even by 2 or 3 percentage points, throws you off dramatically. So it really is the challenge to the polling industry, and nobody's been able to crack this nut, is to really identify who the likely voters in the population are.
Jamie, on polling?
Yeah, I think one of the things is that you can no longer rely just on polling. So I think David is right. Polling is great for discovery. It's great for understanding what the issues are and what dimensions of those issues matter and to whom, right? In a fluid and dynamic campaign, we're obviously some lumpiness in terms of predictions. But then there's other things that we can use. We can watch money coming in. Is the money coming into the campaign from existing donors or is it from new donors? People are not giving money for the first time to a campaign that they're not going to vote for and support. So if you see a big surge in that, if you see a big surge in turnouts in teletown halls and other communications tactics we can use, we can stitch that together with polling and make sort of a melange which gives us a better idea of what's happening.
Yeah, it's a whole constellation of data points or inputs, really. Fundraising, as Jamie mentioned, rally size is actually really important. Membership numbers. I mean, let's just take the recent example of the Conservative leadership race. Their membership numbers went through the roof, over 250,000, and so have their fundraising dollars. You know, so I think looking at all those points. But it is true, over the last number of years, we have faced kind of some challenges in the polling industry. I mean, the Redford case was one of those where we all thought the Wild Rose was going to win, and then it turned out not.
But we didn't, because we
when
knit
you look
those
at the data
together.
points,
Exactly. Right.
Then you looked at her fundraising, you looked at her numbers, they were solid.
Those things can be misleading, though. Let's be honest, right? Because big crowds don't necessarily mean anything. Donors could be coming from your existing base. There's nothing that has, if polling is not quite as accurate as it once was, again, nothing has come along that is remotely that representative. So those other things can be additional nuances you consider, but they wouldn't replace it.
All right, let me, we touched on this a little bit in the first couple of answers, how Trump especially, but Trump and Trudeau have changed the game of campaigning from the point of people like you. How significant has that change been beyond the things we've already talked about? David?
I think what Trump and Trudeau tell us right now is that every election is a change election. Okay? In the last electoral cycle, and leaving aside Trump and England and everything else, in the last electoral cycle in Canada, most of the federal government and most of the provincial governments changed hands. All but one of the provincial governments that didn't change hands changed their leader. So the status quo is losing everywhere. Most people are fundamentally dissatisfied with the present, about their standard of living and with the way the economy is working, and they're scared about the future. And if you're not promising change and delivering change, you're going to be in trouble.
So, it's an interesting thesis, but I'm not sure if I agree that every election from now onwards is a change election. But I do think that when the electorate is faced with a change election, like they were with Harper in 2015 or in 2016, the U.S. presidential, that they will always choose real change versus incremental change. So you actually have to have dramatic change and show how things will be different. And I think we're seeing that in other ways, in other parts of the world, you know, with Corbyn, with, with Bernie Sanders to some extent, you know, when people are reaching for more dramatic and ideological change as opposed to, say, a Hillary Clinton, more of the same.
You still working with Kathleen Wynne?
Yes, I am.
How are you going to frame what you just said about change with Kathleen Wynne?
Well, because she represents change in policies, not change in personnel, but change in policy. So if you're a person that believes what I just said about the economy, and you look at a person that is making tuition fees free for most people, that is making drugs free for people under the age of 25, that is testing a basic income pilot.
Have to go through the whole. So you're going to ask for equal time here for a moment.
Well, what I'm saying is that is a package that is designed to say we represent policy change, right? And the other people are the status quo candidates in policy terms. So if you want to change people, change people.
One line would be, if you want policies that address people's needs and are socially responsible, you'll actually choose the candidate that has consistently backed them, like an Andrea Horvath. You know, instead of
Okay, all right. Do you want your 10 seconds on the Conservative?
I think that when we talk about change, I think when we talk about change, it was really important to zone in on the change of tactics available to campaigns. And yes, television is still important, and yes, conventional polling is still important, and yes, all these things that we've relied on are still important. But something is happening when we're able to get rid of the intermediaries, and anybody can be a propagator of news or a point of view. You don't need to have a lot of money, you don't need to be rich, you don't need to have an organization, you just need to have some connectivity to Facebook or to Instagram or to something else, and you can cause a lot of trouble. And we need to be alive to that and what it means. I don't know what it means yet, but what I do know is it's going to be a lot different than it was before, even in the last election. This stuff is changing really fast.
All right, I want to quickly show something from Kathleen. It wasn't in 2011, it was actually 2015, the last federal. Watch this.
And it starts like this. It literally starts with the door knockers, the outside scrutineers, who will knock on a door and say, hi, I'm Kathleen Monk. I'm a Megan Leslie volunteer, and I'm here to ensure that you're going to get out to vote. And we ask really key questions. And they are, what time do you plan to vote? Do you need a ride? How are you going to get there?
Now, you know, I'm assuming that's never going to change. It's certainly not going to change yet.
Yeah.
In spite of all the changes that are taking place, that kind of contact with voters is not going to change.
That contact is really important. What has changed slightly is the language that I highlighted in that clip, where we actually ask voters to articulate their entire plan, not just, are you going to vote, Peter? Yeah, I'm going to vote. It's like, tell me about it, because psychological, studies have proven that when people actually have to verbally, articulate what their plan is, they're more likely to do it. So that's what campaigners and door knockers and organizers are trying to do. And also year-round engagement. It's no longer just coming around at election time, right? Parties have to be engaged, 4 years out. That's why you see the parties in Ontario, already campaigning for an election that won't take place till next year.
We've only got a minute left, and so I want to thank the three of you. We've worked together for more than a few years now, and I'm sure the insiders will still have a role to play in the future. But why it's been so important to me, what you three have done, is you've put in many ways a human face on politics in a way that I'm not sure we've captured before. And I'm not just talking about the people in the back room, but it's talking about the kind of things you've said about the candidates you've worked for and the challenges that they face, in very personal ways that we haven't noticed before. So I really appreciate the time working with all three of you.
Thank you, Peter.
And as you, it's been a great privilege to be here with you.
And Peter, I wouldn't embarrass you on television, but in the room outside, I do have nomination papers for you to sign up for the next Conservative candidate in the riding of your choice.
Yeah, don't hold your breath. Yeah. All right, that's my last Insiders. It's been a treat for me, and I hope for you, the viewers. Don't go too far away. The National isn't going anywhere. We'll be right back.